Okay, so picture this. You're at the Thanksgiving table, right? And the conversation inevitably turns to football. But this year, you're ready to drop some serious historical knowledge bombs.
Oh, I love it.
We're going deep on Thanksgiving Day football, way beyond the basic Detroit plays, Dallas plays stuff.
Yeah.
Get ready to unearth some fascinating origins and traditions you might not know.
You might be surprised to learn that Thanksgiving football actually predates the NFL by decades.
Seriously? Wow, I always just assumed it was an NFL invention.
Nope. We're talking about games that were happening even before the forward pass was a thing.
Okay, now that's going way back. So what was the scene like back then? Who was playing?
Well, picture this. It's 1876, just a few years after football was even invented. And you've got Yale and Princeton facing off on Thanksgiving.
Yale and Princeton. Wow, so it was a college thing first.
It was the era of college football dominance, and Thanksgiving was already a national holiday, a perfect day for families to gather and enjoy a good game.
So it wasn't just a random day for a game. They were already tapping into that holiday spirit.
Exactly. And the tradition quickly spread. The University of Michigan started their own Thanksgiving game tradition.
Michigan. Okay, so we're starting to see some familiar names pop up.
And their matchups against the Chicago Maroons in the 1890s are considered by some to be the true beginning of Thanksgiving Day football as we know it.
The Chicago Maroons, I have to admit, I've never heard of that team.
They were a powerhouse back then. Sadly, they folded in the late 1930s.
Ah, that's too bad. But it's amazing to think that these games were happening over a century ago.
It really is. And it wasn't just college football either. There were some early professional teams playing on Thanksgiving too.
Really, pro football in the 1890s, that's a mental image I'm trying to conjure up.
The Allegheny Athletic Association, for instance, was playing games on Thanksgiving in the 1890s. And the Ohio League often scheduled their biggest rivalry games for Thanksgiving.
The Ohio League. Now, those were some intense rivalries, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The Canton Bulldogs and the Massillon Tigers, for example, had a legendary rivalry that often played out on Thanksgiving.
Those names ring a bell. I feel like I've heard them mentioned in some old football documentaries.
There were huge events that drew massive crowds. And of course, with that much excitement and money on the line, there were bound to be some controversies.
Oh, this sounds like a story is coming.
Well, in 1906, the Massillon Tigers were accused of throwing a game against the Bulldogs, a scandal that rocked the league and impacted Thanksgiving games.
So even back then, there was drama and intrigue surrounding these games.
It's a reminder that even in the early days of the sport, the stakes were high and the competition was fierce.
So we've got Thanksgiving football as a pretty big deal even before the NFL existed. So did the NFL just pick up where these early leagues left off?
Not exactly. While many teams played on Thanksgiving in the early NFL years, it wasn't the formalized tradition it is today.
Okay, so it wasn't automatically 2 games every year, Lions and Cowboys.
Right. It was more sporadic. Teams like the Chicago Bears, Cardinals, and even the New York Giants would play on Thanksgiving.
So how did it evolve into this tradition we know today, with the Lions and Cowboys becoming synonymous with Thanksgiving football?
Well, it took a bit of ingenuity and a savvy businessman who saw an opportunity. Enter George A. Richards, the owner of the Detroit Lions.
Okay, Richards, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this guy and his plan.
Richards was a visionary who understood the power of media. He decided to make the Lions the Thanksgiving team, and he had a secret weapon. His own radio station, WJR.
Hold on, he owned a radio station. Now that's thinking ahead.
He was way ahead of his time. Richards used WJR to broadcast the Lions Thanksgiving games nationally on NBC, reaching a much larger audience than ever before.
That's a brilliant move. I mean, even today, media is everything.
And this was a game changer for Thanksgiving football. It marked the beginning of the tradition becoming a true national phenomenon.
That's incredible. But, I've heard there was some political drama that almost derailed the whole thing in the 1930s. Something about Thanksgiving.
Ah, yes. President Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to move Thanksgiving to boost the economy during the Great Depression.
And that caused some problems.
It caused a lot of confusion, and even affected the scheduling of Thanksgiving games. For a couple of years, only the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles played on Thanksgiving.
Wait, why just those 2 teams?
Because they were both in Pennsylvania, one of the few states that adopted Thanksgiving.
Wow. So even presidential politics couldn't stop Thanksgiving football entirely. But how did the Lions manage to become the Thanksgiving team after all that?
They stuck with it. They were the only team consistently playing on Thanksgiving by the end of World War II. And then they doubled down on the tradition by establishing a long-running rivalry with the Green Bay Packers.
The Packers.
Yeah.
So that's where that classic Thanksgiving matchup comes from.
Yep. For over a decade, starting in 1951, the Lions and Packers faced off on Thanksgiving, creating a sense of familiarity and anticipation for fans. It became as much a part of the holiday as turkey and pumpkin pie.
Okay, so we've got the Lions with their radio strategy solidifying the Thanksgiving tradition. But where did the Dallas Cowboys fit into all of this?
That's where things get even more interesting. Get ready for a tale of strategic maneuvering and a shrewd businessman who understood the power of building a brand.
All right, so you mentioned shrewd maneuvering. I'm all ears. Give me the scoop on how the Cowboys got into the Thanksgiving Day picture.
Well, it wasn't as straightforward as you might think. There's this myth that they, demanded to host Thanksgiving games.
Really? I kind of thought that's how it happened.
Nope. It's a good story, but the reality is much more interesting. It all starts with their general manager, Tex Schramm.
Okay, Tex Schramm. So what was his play?
Well, Schramm was a marketing genius. He saw hosting a Thanksgiving game as a golden opportunity for publicity. Remember, this was 1966.
Right. The NFL wasn't the media behemoth it is today.
Exactly. Games on days other than Sunday were rare. So a Thanksgiving game was a guaranteed way to capture a huge national audience.
So it was a chance to put the Cowboys in the spotlight, make them stand out.
Precisely. And Schramm knew that exposure would be invaluable for building the Cowboys brand. But it wasn't just about the publicity. He also recognized the potential for a competitive advantage.
Oh, interesting. You mean like a home field advantage type thing?
Exactly. A short week for the visiting team meant less time to prepare and travel to Dallas. Schramm was a master of leveraging these subtle edges to the Cowboys' benefit.
So he was thinking several steps ahead. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Schramm was always thinking about the big picture, and it paid off. The Cowboys hosting a Thanksgiving game quickly became as much of a tradition as the Lions.
2 Thanksgiving teams, a doubleheader. It's amazing how he turned a holiday game into a strategic asset.
He truly did. But even with the Lions and Cowboys locked in the NFL, decided to shake things up a bit in the mid-70s.
Oh, right. I think I remember hearing about this. They tried to make the St. Louis Cardinals a Thanksgiving team.
That's the one Commissioner Pete Rozelle wanted to see if another team could capture that Thanksgiving magic. The Cardinals weren't a bad team either. They were known for their exciting close games. They were even nicknamed the Cardiac Cards for a reason.
So on paper, it wasn't a terrible idea, but it didn't last long, did it? What went wrong?
Well, for one thing, they just didn't have the same nationwide appeal as the Cowboys. They lacked that brand recognition, and their attendance was pretty weak. And then there was the local opposition.
Local opposition?
Well,
Who were they competing with in St. Louis?
believe it or not, they were up against high school football. St. Louis already had a deeply ingrained Thanksgiving tradition, the Kirkwood-Webster Groves Turkey Day game.
Wow, I've heard of that rivalry. It's pretty legendary.
It is. It's one of the oldest high school football rivalries in the country, dating back to the 1890s. So the Cardinals were trying to compete with a century-old tradition that was deeply woven into the fabric of the community.
It's like trying to replace apple pie with some fancy French pastry.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the same emotional resonance.
Exactly. You can't force a tradition. It has to grow organically and connect with people on a deeper level.
So the Cardinals experiment fizzled out after just 3 years.
Yep. It just goes to show that sometimes the best traditions are the ones that develop naturally.
Back to the Lions and Cowboys then. And for a while, it stayed that way. But then the NFL decided to shake things up again.
That's right. They realized there was even more potential for Thanksgiving football. And that's how we got to the 3-game era we know and love today.
Okay, yeah. I remember when they added that 3rd game. It was a pretty big deal for fans.
It was. In 2006, the NFL decided to add a primetime Thanksgiving game, initially broadcast on NFL Network.
That must have been huge. Before that, you could only watch one game or the other, depending on your network.
It was a game changer. It allowed the NFL to reach an even larger audience and capitalize on the growing popularity of Thanksgiving football. Plus, it provided more flexibility in showcasing different teams and matchups.
And in 2012, that primetime game moved over to NBC under their Sunday Night Football banner, right?
Exactly. That opened it up to even more viewers. So now we had 3 games, a primetime slot, and a whole new level of excitement for Thanksgiving football.
And unlike the Lions and Cowboys, the primetime game doesn't have a fixed host team, right?
That's right. The NFL keeps their options open, showcasing different matchups and giving more teams a chance to be in the spotlight on Thanksgiving.
I like that. It keeps things fresh,
Mm-hmm.
and it creates more anticipation,
Mm-hmm.
because you never know who's going to be playing in that primetime slot.
Yeah.
But there was one year where they had to deviate from that plan, right?
Yes, 2020, the year the pandemic threw everything for a loop.
The Ravens-Steelers game.
Exactly. They had to postpone it due to a COVID outbreak. It was a stark reminder that even our most cherished traditions aren't immune to real-world events.
It definitely felt strange not having that full slate of Thanksgiving games. But thankfully, things have mostly returned to normal. And speaking of returning to normal and cherished traditions, we can't forget about the latest addition to the Thanksgiving Day lineup, the John Madden Thanksgiving Celebration.
Oh, absolutely. That's been a fantastic way to honor a true legend of the game.
Starting in 2022, the NFL decided to put Madden's name on the Thanksgiving games, which is so fitting. He was basically synonymous with Thanksgiving football.
Right. Madden called countless Thanksgiving games during his broadcasting career. His voice, his enthusiasm, his love for the game were a huge part of what made those games so special.
And now they have the Madden Player of the Game Award, with the NFL Foundation donating $10,000 to a youth or high school football program in the winner's name.
It's a wonderful way to honor his legacy. And of course, we can't forget about the turkey legs.
Oh yeah, those giant turkey legs. It's hilarious and iconic.
It's become a Thanksgiving tradition in its own right.
Although I hear Jordan Love got snubbed on the turkey leg front last year.
Apparently they ran out. Can you imagine winning the Thanksgiving game and then being told there's no turkey leg for you?
That's brutal. But it just goes to show that even in a tradition as established as Thanksgiving football, there are always surprises. So let's take a step back and think about everything we've learned on this deep dive into Thanksgiving football history. What are some of the key insights that stand out to you?
Well, one of the biggest things for me is just realizing how much deeper this tradition goes than most people realize.
Yeah, it's easy to think of it as just an NFL thing.
Mhm.
But those early college games and even the pre-NFL pro games really highlight how far back it goes.
And it wasn't just random games either. It was Thanksgiving rivalries. Thanksgiving upsets Thanksgiving scandals from the very beginning.
Yeah, and those early games helped shape what we see today. I mean, the Lions really made Thanksgiving their own.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Thanks in no small part to George A. Richards and that brilliant radio strategy.
Broadcasting those games nationally was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
And it really helped cement the Lions as a Thanksgiving Day team for decades.
It definitely did. And then you have the Cowboys and Tex Schramm recognizing the potential of Thanksgiving football.
Yeah, Schramm was a master at building the Cowboys brand.
Yeah.
And that Thanksgiving game became a signature part of their identity.
Absolutely. He knew how to create a spectacle.
Yeah.
And he understood how to leverage tradition to his advantage.
And even the Cardinals' short-lived stint as a Thanksgiving host taught us something.
It did. It showed us that traditions can't be manufactured. You can't just force something into existence. It has to resonate with fans and grow organically.
Just like trying to create a new holiday out of thin air, which doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Traditions are built on shared experiences, shared memories, and they evolve over time.
And speaking of evolving traditions, we can't forget about the John Madden Thanksgiving Celebration.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful way to honor a man who is truly synonymous with Thanksgiving football.
I mean, who doesn't think of John Madden when they see a giant turkey leg?
It's become an iconic image, and it perfectly captures the spirit of the holiday and the fun-loving nature of Madden himself.
It's a reminder that Thanksgiving football is about more than just the game itself. It's about the food, the family, the traditions, and of course the larger-than-life personalities who make it so memorable.
You got it. And as we look ahead, it's exciting to think about how the tradition will continue to evolve.
We're living in a time of constant change, especially in the world of media and technology. Who knows what Thanksgiving football will look like in 10 or 20 years?
Right. I mean, will we see games streamed exclusively on platforms like Amazon Prime or Apple TV Plus C?
Or maybe even virtual reality Thanksgiving games where fans can feel like they're right there on the field.
The possibilities are endless, and that's what makes it so exciting. This tradition has been going strong for over a century, and it's only going to get bigger and more innovative in the years to come.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Thanksgiving football history, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
A challenge. I like it.
Next time you're gathered around the Thanksgiving table and the conversation turns to football pooball, don't just talk about the game itself.
Oh, no. Dig deeper.
Exactly. Talk about the history, the traditions, the forgotten teams, and the legendary figures who helped shape this incredible holiday ritual.
Impress your friends and family with your newfound knowledge. Maybe even make a few predictions for the Madden player of the game. And who knows, you might even be inspired to try and win a turkey leg of your own.
From all of us here at The Deep Dive, we wish you a happy, delicious, and football-filled Thanksgiving.